Super excited to have back on the Ostrom Avenue podcast. Brent Axe of Syracuse.com does a fantastic podcast for them as well that I encourage everybody to listen to. Brent, welcome back to the pod. You're a veteran here. How's your summer been?
What summer?
Yeah,
I feel like we haven't had one. The
yeah,
lacrosse team makes the Final Four, and then there was a coaching search, and then there was a big to do about Calvin Russell coming in and the commitment that Syracuse got there. And then, yeah, I got like 8 days off, and then we got back in the hamster wheel and covered training camp. So I didn't have a summer, but that's okay. We're out there doing it for the people. But you guys are back, and we're ready to roll, and it's good to be back here on the Ostrom Avenue pod for sure.
yeah. Appreciate that. Yes, students will start rolling back into Syracuse next week. We're recording this on Thursday, and classes get going. So that's when the fall sports season's really in full swing. But me and Griffin were talking about it last week, actually, how it just felt like we were talking about lacrosse, and then the busy summer we've had. What did you make of that? That since we're on it right now, what did you make of that
Mhm.
Calvin Russell committing to Syracuse? That one, I don't think people expected it. The whole recruiting thing on Twitter was kind of a mess. When he was going to commit and whatnot. What did you make of that get for Fran Brown?
It was a major score for Fran Brown, not only in terms of the player you're getting, but the perception, right? You need to get five-star recruits in order to validate yourself as a big time recruiter. I mean, Fran Brown's reputation as a great recruiter speaks for itself based on who he brought in, some players that got on the field right away. You could look at the resume, but you got to do it here, right? And I still feel like you've got to send that message. Now, that's a lot easier to do in basketball. You get one five-star in basketball, you're set, right? I mean, Carmelo Anthony's the ultimate example here in Syracuse, but Donnie Freeman was a
Yeah, I
top
was about
10
to say that.
guy,
Yeah.
right? You need to send that message out there, however often it is. For a Syracuse, it's not quite as often as some other schools, but it was such a huge score perceptionally too, because it shows that Syracuse can go into Florida. They have the personnel, not only in Fran but in others, that can convince a five-star big-time prospect that Syracuse is the right place for them. And it's not just because they can pay you a certain amount of money. It's not. It's just the coach made a connection and swiped away a player for the time being from somebody who was this close to going to a Michigan or a major power. Now, he hasn't signed on the dotted line yet.
Oh,
You got to
yeah.
stay on him
Yep.
until that comes in. But that was a major, major score because it's one thing to say, well, you're a great recruiter and you're converting a lot of 3 and 4 stars, which is great. You need to do that. But it was that final stamp of validation to say, look what they can go do. And 5 stars recruit other 5 stars, guys. That's going to be the key.
That's true. That's what we've been seeing online is some of Miami Northwestern down there in Florida has been a key hotspot for Syracuse. It seems like Darius Johnson, wide receiver, who I think went down with an injury over before the season. But one of the things is Fran Brown's been saying is top 25 in the rankings and top 25 recruiting. Right now, according to 24/7, Syracuse 23. Big deal for them. Want to transition now to this season. You've been at some practices recently. Is there anything you've noticed that's been different from year one to year two of the Fran Brown
If
preseason?
if anything, he's more intense, which I didn't think was possible. I've talked to some players who have said the same thing. I was talking to Dan Villari recently. He's like, I can't believe he's more intense this year than last year. Fran, man, guys, and he literally is the soundtrack of practice because he wears a wireless microphone.
Hmm.
So his voice booms. He's the voice of God above everybody. So that's outside. And then when we come in for practice, sometimes we wait in the Ensley Center and the speakers are on in there. So even if you're not watching practice, it's almost like a radio show or a podcast. You're listening to practice. Fran says a lot of things I won't repeat even here on a podcast. He's very, very in your face and passionate, but I think the players appreciate that because it's good and bad. He'll get on you if you're not doing something. Like the other day, the wide receivers and the defensive backs were not doing what Fran expected of them physically. So he just pulled them all aside and did not the Oklahoma drill because that's banned now, but it was like a version of the
Yeah.
Oklahoma drill. It's like get up and hit. Like you're not hitting, you're not being physical enough, right? So that's what Fran brings to a practice. It's more intense than last year. Last year it was startling and it was new and we were getting used to this because Dino Babers those practices were just not like that. They were different, right? So if anything, they're more intense. It varies in terms of visitors. Some days there's a lot of visitors there. Some days there's not. There's a ton of visitors in the spring. Like every recruit in the world was going to those spring practices to bring that into the conversation. So I would say more intensity, but there's continuity now. Like these guys know what to expect from their coaches. There was a couple coaching changes. Miles White is now the wide receiver coach, and a couple minor new special teams coach in there as well, and Ricky Brumfeld. But I didn't think it was possible for Fran to turn up the intensity dial. But you guys, you're too young to remember this, but I hope you get the reference. Spinal Tap. They turned it up to 11. They found the 11 on the speaker, and they got it there.
Yeah, that's certainly something that we saw last year in that intensity that he brings, and we've heard that he can definitely turn it up even more. And we've gone, I guess, 5 minutes without mentioning the quarterbacks, so now we got to mention the quarterbacks. Were you surprised at all that it went towards Angeli? We all know it was a close race. Just what are your overall thoughts that on the QB1 that Fran goes with?
I can't say I'm surprised, but I thought if all things were even, Fran would go with this guy, right? I think you bring in Ricky to be the successor to Kyle McCord. They paid a lot of money for Ricky Collins, and as long as he didn't screw it up, I thought that's who they'd go with, right? And then if he does not pan out, then you've got Steve Angeli, who he's not a cage-yield veteran, but he's played. Like he's got reps. He's played in big games. He's played in bowl games. He's played in the college football playoff. So he's been there and done that in a sense.
Far more than Ricky.
A lot more than Ricky, which is fair. But I thought if all things were as even and as close as everybody said they were, and they were, I have no reason to believe anything other than that. People I talked to that have been at practices, that have been at the scrimmage, that have been behind the curtain, that even the media can't go behind, have said, I can't even. I've talked to people that have been at scrimmages and have seen 11 on 11. And I'm like, who's going to be the quarterback? Like, Brent, I don't know. Like it's really that even, right? So my surprise though was that I thought Fran was a little more of a risk taker there, right? Go with the guy who I think brings a little bit more to the playbook for Jeff Nixon to work with. But the thing is, Steve Angeli beat out Ricky. He knows that playbook better. Right? Everybody we talk to about Steve, what you hear is the composure, the leadership, the knowledge. He can read defenses, and he just keeps everybody in line, right? So I think what football coaches will always fall back on the safe option, and I don't want to label Steve as the safe option, but he's only thrown one interception in all those snaps that he's taken, and he's somebody that can execute and run an offense that Jeff Nixon wants to run. And you can't compare him to Kyle McCord. They're not the same type of quarterback, but Jeff wants to see his offense run. And the other thing I did hear through camp, guys, is that, and Ricky's just younger and finding his way. He did throw more picks than Angeli. So Fran did mention a couple of things that were important to him. One was, who's the team gravitating to, right? And obviously Steve won that option, not that Ricky didn't. Ricky put in the extra time and did a lot of the things that a quarterback has to do. But the other thing that Fran mentioned is we're going to go through the stats, and this is going to be fair and even. And the stats showed that Steve just doesn't turn the ball over as much. And when you got Tennessee and Clemson in the first month of the season, I could see why they made that choice. But look, credit to Steve. He comes in after spring ball, has to learn the playbook, has to get to know everybody, has to show in camp that he's capable of winning the job, and he won the job. You've got to give him credit for that.
Do you think the QB battle is over, or if Steve Angeli doesn't perform up to expectations, that Ricky Collins could step in at some point?
I don't think the QB battle's over at all. I think it's exactly what you said. If it was that close, right? If Steve starts to show whatever it is, or God forbid he gets hurt, then Ricky is right there to do it. And guys, I've mentioned this stat a few times, and I'm just going to say it again, because in Syracuse, it's rare to see a quarterback go start to finish in a season. Ryan Nassau was the last guy to do it. Now, Eric Dungy started every game in 2018, but he got hurt a couple times and had to come off the field, and Tommy DeVito had to come in and take over for him. He had to save the day against North Carolina back in the day. Other than that, a quarterback has not made it either by injury or performance. So how Ricky handles this is going to be fascinating, because he has got to stay ready. The old cliche is you're one play away, right? There's that. But if Steve slips a little bit, let's face it, the pressure is going to build from people. Like, well, you got Kyle McCord enjoyed the greatest job security ever last year. He never had to look to the sideline. That's not going to be the case with Steve Angeli. So how they handle that if and when he inevitably gets that adverse game, has his, hopefully he doesn't have a 5 interception game like McCord did last year, but when he hits the skids a little bit, particularly against Clemson, Every player on that Clemson defense is getting drafted next year.
Yeah.
Like, let's see how he handles that. Let's see how the coaching staff handles it. And let's see how the very patient fan base handles it if he hits adversity. It's
Yeah.
good to know it's there. I don't think this is the old, if you have two quarterbacks, you have none cliche. I think they legitimately have two quarterbacks, but the competition is not over in my eyes. No.
Yeah, and we'll get to schedule a little later, but the schedule does not benefit having a QB battle. Or, Tennessee right off the bat is not kind of the spot you want to be in. With a decision being made at QB, especially if it doesn't pan out from right away against the Volunteers. And I don't want to sound like I'm discrediting Steve Angeli here, but is it fair to say that Ricky Collins is maybe the more talented quarterback than Angeli, skill wise, and Angeli's just more of that game manager?
There's no question about it. If you just
Yeah.
lined him up and watched them do drills, Ricky has
Hmm.
the stronger arm. He's more mobile. He is the more physically gifted quarterback. And Jelly can sling it. Don't get me
Yeah.
wrong. And guys, he has developed. I'm sure you would have asked about him at some point, but it's good to bring him up now. And Jelly is developing a great chemistry with Jonte Cook.
Yeah.
You could tell that's going to be his first look. That's going to be his guy. Now you have Justice Ross Simmons coming back, who's having an excellent camp. Daryl Gill, who just doesn't drop the ball. And then you're going to work in some other guys there. But Angeli, you could tell, has already developed a chemistry that McCord had with Trevor Pena. And obviously, Cook essentially steps into that Trevor Pena role. So that's good. But when you're talking about physical skills, you want somebody that's got to rip the ball 40 yards down the field. That's unquestionably Ricky Collins. But most of what your offense is going to be, honestly, is more fitted for Steve Angeli. The intermediate throws, the cross routes, get rid of the ball quickly, find the open guy, he can get it in a tight window. It's not a huge gap, but I think if you sat there and just said, okay, who's the more physically gifted quarterback, Ricky's going to jump out at you.
You mentioned John Tate Cook. Syracuse lost four of its five top pass catchers last season. After Trevor Pena left, it was kind of what I was thinking is, okay, Syracuse is not going to have that number one guy necessarily. They're going to have a bunch of guys that can catch the ball, that are going to be good pass catchers. You bring in John Tate Cook. He had a interesting offseason, came to Syracuse after going to Washington, some off the field issues as well. How good has he looked at practice? And is he like that top 40 recruit that people thought he was going to be a potential first or second round draft pick eventually?
He has looked spectacular at practice, Griffin. I didn't get it on tape, if you will, digital tape, but my friend Christian de Guzman from Noon's Magician did and put it on Twitter. So I would go find this. He made a one-handed catch at practice the other day that just made you say, okay, here we go. He flies all over the field. He gets open. You mentioned it. You can see why he was a top 40 prospect. The off-field stuff was interesting in the state of New York. What he was charged with in terms of his possession of marijuana would not have counted, but in Texas, it's still against the law. And then the other thing was kind of a goofy thing. I think I don't have all the details on it, but when I heard the story, I'm like, okay, I don't think he should have been charged with anything there. And then he goes to Washington. From what I understand, just wasn't comfortable at Washington. And if you're not comfortable somewhere, then don't stick around, right? I gave him credit for that in the portal era of like, it's not a fit for you. The portal's there. So now Syracuse is giving him this chance. Fran Brown gets on a FaceTime with him and says, come play for me. I want you, right? That direct Fran Brown approach that all these players talk about. He's a weapon. So I am as curious as anybody to see not how he fills the Pena role, because I don't think they're the same player, but what he brings to the offense that maybe Trevor Pena didn't. And I think he's going to be that first look from Steve Angeli or frankly Ricky Collins if he gets in there. So that was a major score in the portal for Syracuse. And they were very aggressive at certain positions in the portal, offensive line being the other one. So they're going to be happy with that. But guys, I'm telling you, this wide receiver room, we mentioned JRS, we mentioned Daryl Gill, a guy that's really popped at camp and is going to force this coaching staff to get him on the field is Jalen Hornsby. 6'3", he's a young guy finding his way, but he gets up and gets the football. Like there is not a throw he can't get up and get. If you loft it a little bit, I'm thinking of all the times Jackson Meeks did this last year. They just kind of lofted it in the end zone and let him go get it. Hornsby is a guy that can do that. And of course, Demetrius Samuel is going to get in there at some point at wide receiver. We're all waiting for those moments when number one runs on the field, and that's going to be something fun and special to watch.
Yeah, and we were reminiscing on how it felt lacrosse season wasn't too far ago, and something that does feel far ago is when Dan Villari was lining up at quarterback people kind of forgot about him last year. He had a down year. Can he, slot into a number one tight end role on this team, or is he still kind of that, tool you have to potentially use in certain situations?
That's my biggest question mark, probably on the whole team, if not certainly the offense.
Yeah.
So Jamie Tremble was supposed to be that guy. Tremble's been in a green jersey throughout camp. They say he's got spasms in his lower legs. He did participate in drills the other day when we were at practice, so I think he's getting closer. God bless Dan Villari and what he did 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, I just
People
have this
forget, I think.
image. I mean, Dan Villari in that press room after Syracuse clinched a bowl game. He's covered head to toe in ice bags and had to get them literally over the finish line, right? Along with the Quinn Allen, who they were running that whatever offense that was that got him through the season with all the injuries
Yeah.
when Garrett Schrader was hurt. Last year, Villari was hurt. He was playing through a number of injuries, a torn labrum. He was wearing the old school neck roll, and not for looks, not for,
Yeah.
the Brian
Swag.
Bosworth
Yeah.
swag. Yeah, Dan Conley, if you remember him from Syracuse. No, he had to wear that thing because he was hurt. So he's healthy. But is he a primary target in that offense? Is this a guy that can stretch the field? I'm in no way comparing him to OG because you can't.
No.
But can he bring that kind of role to the offense? I don't know. I've got to see it. And I think you're going to see both Villari and Tremble kind of go back and forth to figure out who that guy can be for Steve Angeli.
You mentioned Demetrius Samuel. We'll head over to the defense and I guess the offense if he's really going to be playing that time. Is it crazy that he's a starting cornerback at 17 years old? Fran Brown hasn't mentioned many starters. They haven't talked about the depth chart much. They've mentioned a QB1 and they've mentioned Demetrius Samuel starting at corner. Is
A
that not
couple
crazy?
times. The faith that Fran Brown has in Demetrius Samuel is incredible because this was mentioned in the spring. Let's not forget, guys.
Yeah.
So we figured out Demetrius kind of let the cat out of the bag during a media session. He's like, "Oh, I was running some reps at wide receiver." And we're like, "Oh, really?" and so, and then you follow up, and Fran, to his credit, leaned into it. Yep, he's going to play both ways. He's our starting cornerback. I'm like, Fran, it's March, right? But that's how much faith he has in this guy. But it also shows you how much opportunity there is in that room to earn time. The other starting cornerback is Chris Peel, who they brought in as a transfer from Georgia. So, guys, what does that tell you? There's spots open in that room. So you can spin that to be like, I recruited you, I gave you the job, I handed you the starting spot, but it just shows you what they lost from that room and that it could be one of the weaknesses on the team. Now, they're free to prove me wrong. You've got some veterans at safety and Deuce Chestnut and Devin Grant that can make up for that. But Griffin, you said it. That's a lot to put on a 17-year-old. And he's been great in camp. If you just watch, and if he didn't have that blinking neon light above his head that he's 17, you'd be like, that kid's a player.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm as curious as anybody how he's going to handle this. I mean, Tennessee is going to be interesting because they have no experience at receiver. They have talent in that room because they're Tennessee, but I think they have a total of like 80 catches in the entire wide receiver room. So you don't have a fear there that he's going to be overwhelmed because everybody on the offensive side of the ball, they have some good tight ends. Don't get me wrong. They're just as inexperienced as he is. So you put talent on the field and let's face it, guys, that's a beacon for recruiting. Well, look at this.
Yeah.
It's going two ways, getting on the field
17.
early. You get the message that the opportunity will be there. So the other day it was funny because it was mentioned that he was going 50-50 and my colleague Chris Carlson and I kind of looked at each other like, there's no way. There's no way. Fran did clarify that in his Fran Brown way. You mentioned it, emphasizing that he's my starting cornerback. So he didn't give us the percentage, but it ain't 50-50, guys, right? It's more like 70-30.
Yeah.
But he is going to go both ways. So put him at punt return too. Let's just get all three checked off in a game, right? Let's go.
Yeah. The dome will definitely, you'll hear a crowd pop every time he walks out on the field on the offense, certainly. But sticking on that defense, for me, I look at it, you want to look at last year's depth chart and you compare it whenever this one comes out. It's going to be a lot of different names, a lot of veteran guys leaving that defense, obviously many for the draft, which is great for the program. But are you concerned with, the amount of nuance that will be on that whole defense?
Yes and no. What they make up for is there's experience in a guy like David Reese, who I just think of the great line from Tommy Boy. A lot of people go to school for 8 years. They're called doctors, right? But David Reese has just had injuries situations, and they've had all these waivers and COVID and all these things. It's like, hey man, if I can keep playing college football, I'm going to keep playing college football. But he brings a needed element in that room at the pass rush with David O. And I think Dennis Jacquez can handle it, but I don't see anybody in that group that's on the Fidel Diggs level. Okay, they can prove me wrong there, but Diggs was just, you can line him up at linebacker, at end, and he's going to make the New Orleans Saints by all accounts.
Yeah.
I don't see that. Kevin Jobity came to camp 20 pounds heavier. Good on him to do that because Syracuse needs to stop the run more. Tank is back, and he was just injured last year. He actually had an appendectomy last year. Shout out to Tank. I went through that myself last year. That's no fun.
Yeah.
Right? But he looks sharp. He looks healthy. He's a leader in that room. Derek McDonald brings leadership to the linebacking group, and that brings us to a guy. I'll tell you what, guys, if you're talking about somebody who's popped at camp, that's the South Dakota transfer, Gary Bryant. He looks great. He looks great. He had 106 tackles last year. I'm as curious as anybody to see how he makes the step up from FCS to powerful or ACC level football, but the guy can play. And there's certain things you take away from practice. Every time he hits someone or hits a sled or hits anything, it just pops, right? It's just, he can hit. And I'm excited to see him on the field. I think that's going to be a great addition for that defense. So at least, even though they're new, guys like Reese and Bryant bring a lot of experience in the game itself. But the theme throughout practice, guys, and this was an issue for Syracuse last year. I remember writing this and saying this a number of times. The bend but don't break defense they played last year.
Yeah.
There were moments where Diggs or somebody just saved their bacon when they were about to break. And they've talked all camp about tackling, getting better at tackling, being a better tackling team. And that's everywhere on the field, at every position. Recognizing how much of an issue that was. Robert Wright, the linebacker coach, said that they studied Iowa. They studied NFL teams. They had to go outside of their room to figure out, okay, well, what are some techniques that work so this can get better? And this was a defense that had Diggs, Justin Barron, Elijah Clark, Marlowe Wax, guys that are all in NFL camps right now. So it just goes to show you, with that much talent, they still struggled and still, got by on the hair on their chinny chin chin a lot last year. So what does this group do that's not quite as talented as that one, but maybe it does bring a little experience in some key areas, but certainly a lot of inexperience at that cornerback position.
Reese reminds me of the tight end from Miami last year, Cam McCormick, how the whole world is kind of following him as his 8th year of college football. Let's go on to Tennessee. Do you think this is one of the more highly anticipated opening games for Syracuse in recent years?
No question about it. Probably since Syracuse, Tennessee in 1998.
That's what I was thinking. I was trying to think of a game or an opener that was like this, but I feel like the program just hasn't had this spotlight in such a long time.
I'm probably forgetting one or two, but it feels like the typical openers in recent years have been like last year. You play Ohio or you play Colgate. Get mix, kind of, you don't get preseason football in college, so kind of slide in as best as you can. Yeah. Not this year. Let's play Tennessee in the Mercedes-Benz Dome with 80% of the building, frankly, are going to be Tennessee fans. You got to challenge yourself a little bit here. I'm really excited that this is the opener because at the end of the day, guys, this is entertainment, and I love the juice. But boy, that schedule, man. If John Wildhack and Herm Frazier, who makes the football schedule, could do this again 4 years ago, knowing this was how the schedule was going to break out, I don't know if they would have added this one in, right? This game, SMU on the road, Miami on the road, Notre Dame on the road. That's tough. That is tough sledding to have to play all those teams, either at a neutral site in this case or on the road. But per your question, man, that Syracuse, Tennessee game in 1998, people forget that was not Peyton Manning. It was T. Martin. The year after Peyton Manning won the Heisman or should have won the Heisman over Charles Woodson and that whole deal. They win the national championship, but there was an awful call in that game. Pull it up on YouTube. The pass interference on Will Allen late in that game was such a crock. I can't believe that got called in a major college football game like that. We see bad calls all the time, but you hate to see a game like that come down to a bad call, but it did. 1 point game, Syracuse loses, and then they go to the big house the next week, Donovan McNabb and company, and they slam Michigan. So how about that? That year they started with Tennessee, then went to Michigan. I remember in 1992 they had Texas and Ohio State back to back, right? It's like, so sometimes you could take too big of a bite off the apple. So you'll get Tennessee, but then look, Connecticut's not a pushover.
No, it
That
wasn't
team
last
won.
year.
They weren't last. They won 9 games last year, right? And Syracuse flirted with disaster in that game. And I don't think they would have ever lost it, but remember, they had a couple of missed kicks in that game, and
Yeah.
that score was a little too close than what it should have been. But they're not a pushover. Then you get the one game you get where everybody's in the pool and you can kind of essentially get a preseason game that counts is Colgate. Like they're going to roll Colgate. But then that schedule does not let up at all after that. So, I think it was actually Josh Heupel who said this. Let me pull up the quote here because I like this. There's no time to, what was it? He said, there's no time for us to be young.
Yeah.
No time for us to be young. And that's the case with Syracuse. There's no time for you to grow up. Like your schedule is, you better put your big boy pants on for this one.
Yeah, and I mean, do you think they can get anything on the road? Because I was thinking back to Dino Babers. He always played, Clemson close. That was his team. He could always play close. Fran Brown, last year that schedule on the road was easy. He went to Berkeley, he went to Chestnut where you lost. Do you think there could maybe be, some Fran Brown magic, like against a Clemson or against a Notre Dame, maybe kind of like what Dino Babers, weirdly had against Dabo Swinney?
I think Clemson's going to be a tall order for that one. That team is just absolutely loaded, particularly on defense. They might have the best quarterback in the country, but you said it. I mean, they had Trevor Lawrence and they had all these players, and Syracuse just would go in there and would give them the fight of their lives every single time. SMU, I mean, they're just a team that they bring Jennings back at quarterback, and they're just like, we're going to score 40 and see if you can too. That can work to your benefit on the road if you just get in a shootout. If Angeli by then is getting in sync with that offense, I certainly think they can beat Miami on the road. They proved they could beat Miami last year, and Miami, I think they're a tad overrated. They've got talent, and I think Carson Beck's a great quarterback, but they can win that game, especially with the confidence they built up. And I know it was at the Dome, but I certainly could see them winning that game. Notre Dame, who knows what Notre Dame's going to be late in the year? They've got a new quarterback in there, of course, Angeli. Yeah. And the storyline there, if you can go back to South Bend and beat that team, would be amazing to see. But that wouldn't stun me because it's all about health at that point. Who's the healthier team a few days before Thanksgiving? So they need to get at least one of these games on the road. Like they get Tennessee in their back pocket out of the chute. That is so huge for this team because, guys, the home slate, that's not a walk in the park either. Okay. Duke's good. Who knows what North Carolina's going to look like on Halloween night? That's going to be such a fun night at the Dome. Pitt beat you last year, and that's a rivalry game. That you can't just put that in the books, right? There's some tough games on the homes. Like we said, it does not let up. It does not let up all year, other than maybe Connecticut and Colgate.
Yeah, but Boston College as well. They couldn't beat them. I know that was on the road, but you still had to play a decent BC team last year.
I mean, you got to beat BC, right? They've been wearing the shirts all camp, 4th and 1, 4th and 9, the whole deal. Like you better beat that team. But that's the last game of the year. And again, how healthy are you in the last game of the year? Always a big question.
Yeah.
As a Patriots fan, I'm fascinated for what Bill Belichick is going to do down in UNC. I mean, the team could be great. The team could be awful. Who knows? I'm looking forward to that one. What do you think realistic expectations are for this team? Great season last year, year two, Fran Brown, tough schedule, all put together. What is going to happen for Syracuse?
First of all, as you said you're a Patriots fan. As I say, go Bills.
Yeah.
As a Bills fan, it's nice that the tables have been turned in that department, and I'm not going to get too cocky here because it's the NFL and things turn around quickly. But it's nice that we've got New England's number as of late. Realistic expectations. So I asked a gentleman by the name of Eric Kane this question. Eric is going to be on my podcast next week. He's from VolQuest. He hosts the Locked On Vols pod. Great conversation. I think you guys will enjoy it. So what I said to him is, if I came from the future, okay, to a Syracuse fan. I got him alone on a mountaintop, and I said, guys, 7-5, deal or no deal. How many Syracuse fans are going to take that? All
All
things
should.
considered.
All of them should.
Probably a
All of
lot.
them should.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think that's a reasonable expectation. I think if you go 7-5 with all the things that happen in football, all the weird stuff that comes up, the injuries, everything, you take that and run. And I think they can get to 7-5. Do I think this is a team that's going to be knocking on the door of the college football playoff again this year? I think that's a big ask because what we saw last year is so many things have to go right. And you have to have an elite quarterback. You have to stay healthy. You've got to make the big plays on defense, which, again, to their credit, they did against Georgia Tech. They did with 10 minutes to go against Cal. They didn't against BC. They didn't against Pitt. Obviously, they got run in that game. And Stanford, what's your Stanford this year? What's that one game where just nothing goes right and you stub your toe and, oh, my God, Stanford just kicked a field goal, won this game. What happened, right? So you throw all that in the pot, and if I tell you the meal that you get out of it is 7-5, take that and run, man. Take that and run. But I think they can get there. That's not like the ceiling of this team. Could they go 8-4? I could see it. But beyond that, now we're getting a little pie in the sky.
Yeah, definitely. And last thing, this is my biggest pet peeve of talking about it. I hate talking about special teams. Special teams should just do its thing and you don't have to talk about it. Fortunately, last year, we had to talk way too much about special teams. I know they don't let you watch a ton of practice. Can you give me some reassurance of special teams that it's going to be better this season, or is that still going to be something where Syracuse fans are going to be biting their nails when that unit comes out there?
God, it better be better than it was last year.
Yeah.
Special teams, there's another thing they essentially got away with, guys. Special teams was a disaster last year. UNLV game is the one that stands out, but I mentioned it. UConn, you missed a couple of kicks, and you were just biting your nails every time, either if it was Jaden O, if it was Jackson Kennedy, if if the four other guys, it felt like was kicking last year. They had coverage issues. I mean, you think of it, poor Jack Stonehouse, he's one of the best punters in the country, but they were getting after him because they couldn't block. So you make a coaching change. We saw limited special teams at practice. We did see some special teams work the other day. And I'll say this, I felt a little bit better about the coverage. I like this, that I saw Derek McDonald out there. I like that I saw Tank Wilson out there. I like that I saw some veterans that are stepping into special teams roles. So that's encouraging. Trip Woody hit a 55-yard field goal with room to go, which would have been good from 60. I want to be nice here. He had his challenges in the spring.
Yeah.
Okay. I watched him in the spring and I was like, oh boy, much better in the fall. Jaden O is like, I'm trying to think of the right way to put this. He's like I don't even know what his percentages are, but I think of him as like a 70% kicker. He's going to make 7 out of 10, but he's not, he runs out there from 45 and you're like, we got this. You're still like,
it's like a Shaq at the line kind of deal.
Perfect analogy, right? Maybe not that bad.
Yeah, but
like he's a free throw shooter where I'm not lining up the tweet that says free throws matter. He's going to bank it.
You're not giving him the ball when you need free throws.
Exactly. You're still like, is he going to make this? And you said it best. I shouldn't have to think about special teams. When it stands out as much as it did last year for Syracuse, that's a big ask for them to take the step up that they need to. So they better be. Cook's going to return some punts, which will be, he's electric. I mean, rarely do we see big kick returns these days, it seems, in college football, but he's set to do that. Malachi James would certainly line up there and hopefully give you some boomer bust plays. But the coverage last year, the missed kicks, the constant mistakes, it was bad. It's as bad as I've ever seen here. So let's be positive here. We'll end on a positive note with that.
Yes.
They got nowhere to go but up.
Yeah.
And they better.
Exactly. Brent, thank you so much for taking the time. Brent's got a fantastic podcast. We should expect that after I listen a lot after basketball season. After football games, we should expect to see one up, right?
Absolutely, guys. So we'll be doing a live post-game pod after
Awesome.
every game, and the Syracuse Sports Podcast. Subscribe today and all the
Yep.
places you get your pods. That will be doing a lot of preview stuff throughout the week as well. And like we said, we're back at it here. So
Yes.
after a summer of leisurely pods, we're going to be cranking them out 2 or 3 a week, hopefully, including the post game shows you mentioned. So appreciate you that, and of course, read all the fun stuff at Syracuse.com as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brett. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, boys. Great to have the belt, and I am not giving it up. So anytime Mike Waters or anybody else on the list comes on, you get me back on so I can keep the belt as the most frequent guest on this podcast.
Will do. Thanks, Brent.